My presentation is called the road less traveled, basically because I feel that the kind of work which I'm doing right now or have been doing in the past 20 years is, or the kind of work which I've been doing for the past 20 years has led me to believe that there is much more which can be done, especially now that I've started looking into the realm of the contemplative practices. And this is something which I am scorned at a lot of times when I'm working. However, I know it makes a fantastic amount of difference to children, and I get a little sentimental when I talk of my kids. Okay, so it has made a lot of difference to me, and I want to show you the journey I've been through with myself and my kids, and you guys decide for yourself as to what is the way forward at this juncture where, there's a big question mark about how things should be. I mean, we've come a long way in terms of scientific inquiry and the kind of fantastic, inventions and discoveries and so on. But I don't think we've really moved very far in terms of how we should be behaving, and how should we take this thing forward, especially when it comes to dealing with children, especially with children with disabilities. All right? My favorite quote is which says, "The only way out is in." And that is something I've, especially in the last 10 years, have really, really come to believe in, that the more we want to know about the outside world, if we want to know more about the outside world and deal with it in an adequate manner, we need to go within ourselves. So that's where I come from. My organization is called ORCIDS, and we work with children with disability in terms of having a multidisciplinary clinic. We work with children within schools, wherein we go and work with children who have special education needs in a regular school setup, so that there is integration and inclusion of differences. And in my opinion, we celebrate diversity to as much as we can. And we also do what is called professional development of training teachers and parents alike, so that they can be adequate role models, I would say, to children, regular neurotypical children, and for children with disabilities. What I'm going to be sharing with you right now are facts, but these facts are pertaining only to our country, India. I'm sure there is similar things happening out in the West and the other countries. However, my focus is going to be our country in India. So what is the status of affairs in terms of disability? How India as a society, as a culture, is currently looking at disability in terms of children. So the first thing is this, that the prevalence of charity model instead of the rights model. We think of disabled people or disabled children as, poor. We feel immense sympathy for them, and we do things for them, not because it's the right as a person, as a human, or as a citizen of the country, but because, because of the feeling we get of, oh, poor child, he can't hear, he can't read, he can't talk. So that charity model is the one which is actually an instigator of whatever behavior we feel or we do to that child. So from that model, we need to slowly shift towards the rights model, which implies that despite the fact that the child has differences, whether he can read, write, not write, hear, not hear, see, not see, is not able to sit down and, copy from the blackboard, or is not able to recite the way everybody else is doing, however, has equal amount of being in that classroom as any one of you or me or anybody else. So it's the right of the child to be there irrespective of what his deficits or what his strengths are. Right now, we are very much in the charity model. However, slowly, I think we are moving towards the rights model, but it's going to take a long time. Next is disabilities. There are a lot of disabilities which are not included in our act. It's called the PWD, which is the Persons with Disability Act, again pertaining to India. There are certain disabilities which are called invisible disabilities. For example, learning disabilities, attention deficit. These disabilities are not part of the act. The only certain disabilities like cerebral palsy, which is spasticity, autism, locomotive disabilities, which I feel are very apparent and visible to naked eye, are the ones which are, as of now, included. So there are certain disabilities which, or conditions which are not included in our legal system. Next is schools are not willing to take in children with disabilities. It is more to do with attitude. The schools in our country right now, when I'm talking about schools, I'm not talking about special schools. I'm talking about schools which are inclusive schools, which have neurotypical children. Those schools are not willing to take in children who have differences because a lot of reasons, attitude, not being equipped, lack of awareness, whatever it is. I'm not going to go there, but the current status is that special children, whatever their strength may be, should go to a special school. They should be surrounded by only disabled people. They should be surrounded by only the likes like them. They cannot become part, they cannot be a part of an inclusive society. That's the current state of affairs. Next is schools are not equipped to deal effectively because of lack of awareness. The schools themselves are not equipped to effectively deal with the children or learning of the children. If the child is on a wheelchair, the schools are not equipped to deal with. They don't have ramps. If the child is hearing impaired, they don't have anybody teaching in sign language. If the child is visually impaired, they don't have any professional who knows Braille. If the child is has learning disabilities or has autism, there are no trained professionals who would be willing or would be able to deal with children effectively. The teacher training programs in India, to become a teacher, one has to do what is called a B.Ed, a Bachelor's of Education. That's the minimum. But in our country, the B.Ed program is for regular neurotypical children. It does not cover disability at all. So the teachers who are being trained to work with the children or the population, the children of the so-called the population of the future, are not trained to deal with any kind of disability. So if you have to become a teacher of the disabled, you need to do a totally separate training, professional training program. So there's no merging point at all. It's almost as if there are two different streams going simultaneously together. Next is awareness of strengths and weaknesses of children with disabilities, very negligible. So there is no awareness. Nobody talks of looking at from the perspective of the strengths of the child. Look, as far as I'm concerned, all of us have some have some deficits, we have some strengths. There is not a single person on this planet to whom we can say that he's absolutely negative. It's not possible. However it is, we look at the glass half empty, half full, or whatever you want to say. The point is, one has to have it in them to look at the positives. But in our system, especially in our education system, nobody wants to look at the child in terms of the strengths. The neurodevelopmental profile is so full of only deficit, 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 deficit. It's a matter of perspective, but it's not happening as of now. So of all this, is there a consequence? Of course. I mean, are there any consequences? There are a hell of a lot of consequences. So what happens from the child's point of view? The child is mistreated. The child is misunderstood. The child is misguided, and the child is misdiagnosed. These are the four main things which happen here. The child is in school. If there is a deficit, there is bullying happening, there's traumatizing happening. The child is not, the motivation, the self-esteem of the child is so thwarted that it's heart-rendering to see some of the kids there. A lot of professionals who are already in the field misdiagnose the kids because they don't know any better. They are misguided as to what they can do in their future, if they can become independent or not, and it carries on. So my question to you is, when we talk about ethics, is this the way it should be done? I mean, is this the way it happens everywhere? Or is this the way we should move forward? Next question is this wrong or is this right? I mean, who's to decide what is wrong? Who's to decide what is right? Is it us? Who's going to tell us this? Who's going to tell all the teachers in our country, which is a country which is humongous in terms of numbers, and all the teachers who already become teachers? Forget about the ones who are aspiring to become teachers. What about those teachers who are already in classrooms, who are already supposedly teaching those kids? Who's going to tell them that what you guys are doing is not right and you need to work around changing your attitude, your teaching style, and so on? Are there any ethics or behavior towards children with disability? Do we need ethics? I mean, there's a child, and a teacher on an average is about 3 or 4 times the age of that child. I would suggest, as an adult, or I would presume as an adult, that the person would be more mature, more empathetic, and especially if you're a trained teacher, do you need ethics? Do you need to be told that you need to be compassionate? Do you need to be told that you have to be kind to a child? I mean, the last time I knew humanity, to be human was part of being a human being. This is not something which is taught. But unfortunately, this is what is happening. I mean, it's scary, the kind of physical abuse which happens, and the non-verbal abuse. You don't have to tell a child, that go to him and slap him on his face to tell him that you don't want him in his class. Your body language is enough. So the humanity is being part of human, as far as I know. So I don't think, one needs an ethics board to tell us how we need to deal with children. Who decides the fine line between acceptable and unacceptable behavior of adults? Who decides that this is right, this is wrong? Only, when we're working with kids. I don't think we need a board to tell us this. But we should be born with something like this. As humans, being the most evolved species of all living organisms, I think we have it in us, but why is it lost? So now what about parents? The consequence of that kind of a society which we have, what happens to the parents? Most of the parents are traumatized. Why are they traumatized? Because their kids go into schools and they're sitting in their house waiting for the child to come back and tell them the next morning, I don't want to go to school. My teacher doesn't like me, my friends make fun of me, nobody wants to talk to me. So what is happening to the, to the emotional aspect of the child? What is happening to the confidence of the child? It's shattered. And the parent has to see this day in, day out for all the schooling years the child has to go through. I mean, it's horrifying. I mean, it's like, you might not have a physical disability as such. You are able to walk and go there to school, carry your bag and get it back. But what the emotional, the toll it takes emotionally on a child is crazy, is all I can say. So is it only, parents are traumatized? A lot of parents are blamed for having children like this. Because of lack of awareness, a lot of teachers, turn around to the parents and they say that it's the upbringing of the child, which is, because of the upbringing of the child has become what the child has become. They are harassed, they're misguided, and a lot of them are in denial. They don't want to see that, yes, there is something wrong with the child for whatever reason, but this is what is happening in the minds of the parents. So whose responsibility is it? I mean, to bring up children, is it only the responsibility of the parents? Or the schools will share it, because the child goes to school for about 6 to 8 hours daily, 6 times a week. So whose responsibility is it to bring up that child and enhance the child's social emotional status? or the confidence or the learning of skills, psychomotor skills, attitudes, whatever the learning takes, who's going to take responsibility? Should the parents say, it's not my responsibility, I'm paying the school bills, I'm paying the school fees, you do it? Or the school says, I'm sorry, these are your children, you take care of it, we will only teach them ABCD. Is that what school is for? To think about. And the next is the teachers. It's very rarely you do come across some teachers who have that, child-oriented, they have that empathetic feeling towards the kids, and they will do that extra work which is required. But what does that one teacher face, by the rest of the staff? She is ridiculed. She has to face the taunts of the rest of the staff. She is discouraged when she's motivated. She's discouraged when she's creative. She's discouraged. Why she's discouraged? Because it implies a change. And most of the teachers who are set teachers in the ways they've been teaching for years and years don't want to change their teaching style, don't want to change their attitude. So that one person who's actually trying is really, really ridiculed. Or is, pushed in a corner to say, forget it, because of you, we would also be forced to do certain things. So is this what our education system should be? I mean, this is just a question thrown at everybody here, that is this what we want our education system to be? Is this, who decides that it's time for a change now? Who is it? Is it you? Is it you? Is it me? Who decides? Who decides the system needs to be overhauled, and it needs to be overhauled fast? We can't wait for another 50 years to go by, especially when everybody feels, or a lot of people feel now that it's time for change, a time for an inclusive society. I do a lot of workshops with parents and with teachers, and whenever I'm sitting and I'm talking to them, this is the first question I ask. I ask them that, where do you see your child or your students when they pass out of school? So after they've been in school for, say, till they're 18 years old, where do you see them? How do you see them? And if you could give me one word. And these are some of the words the teachers and the parents came up with. They said knowledgeable. They want the kids to be really, really smart. They want the kids to be intelligent. They want the kids to be street smart, constructive, overall developed, all-rounder, eligible for college admissions, go-getter, topper, independent, confident, motivated. So great. I mean, these are all the right words to say. And I would like my daughter or my child to also have all these attributes when she is ready to get into college or she's 18. But sadly, really sadly, none of the parents or teacher thought of happy. Till date, none of them actually thought of it and said, I want my child to be happy. And it's scary. I mean, being happy is something which we all know. If I was to ask any one of you here, the monks or the kids or the scientists or the camera people, everybody would know what happy means. But nobody actually, either we take it for granted or we are so oblivious to it. Not a single teacher, not a single parent said, I want my child to be happy. They want them to be this and that and so on and so forth. No, I want to step back. I want my child to be happy. I want myself to be happy. So who do I blame? Who is it? Why is it? Who should I blame that, we do not recognize something which is so basic, which is so essential, something which we are all, I would say we are born with something like this. Nobody teaches us happiness. Even a little baby, 2-3 months old or whatever, knows what happiness is. He might not be able to articulate it, but happiness is a feeling which I think we can identify with. However, it wasn't there for the parents and the teachers. So who do I blame? Should I blame the society that it doesn't give enough importance? Should I blame the culture? Our culture is like this, that, we need to churn out a lot of, what's it called, go-getters and, extremely tenacious people who will do really well, constructive, this, that, and the other. Especially the Indian system is such that, we are taking over the West with our IIT graduates and so on and so forth, and because they have it in them, who cares? I mean, is it really, really important? At the end of the day, I don't know. I mean, this is my personal perspective. Should I blame the school for not getting the kids to feel that happiness is one of their priorities? I'm not saying make it the priority, but at least make it one of the priorities. Should I blame the parents for saying that you don't want your child to be happy? Should I blame the parents that you want your child to become, come out with flying colors in this competitive society? I don't know. Should I blame the government that you have these, syllabus and this curriculum which the child is being killed, doing? Or should I blame God? That you are the one, because of you we are here and so on and so forth. I don't know. I have no clue who to blame. But can I do something about it? Yes, I can do something about it. Even if it means, going on the mountaintop and screaming, somebody has to start somewhere. Like, Gesha Laksar said yesterday, don't wait for everything to be put together and start. I have the whole 9 yards to know what it means to be enlightened. I have the whole program. You can never have the program. But start wherever you can, however small it is, whether it's a smile, whether it's an act of kindness, compassion, whatever, I believe that when I am happy, that I am motivated. This is totally personal, and the fact that whatever has worked with me, I feel can work with anybody else, even with children. So when I am happy, I have seen that I'm much more motivated. I want to be with my kids and I want to do the things. I feel I'm more confident when I'm happy. I am kinder, because I'm at peace with myself and I want to share it with everybody. I am fair. I'm not, feeling as if, oh my God, this should have been mine. I deserve this and the other person doesn't deserve it. No. When I'm happy, I'm fair. I'm more patient. I'm more open-minded. I'm more tolerable, engaging, helpful, and much more. I mean, that's what I am when I am happy. When I'm happy, don't even ask. I also believe that if it is true for me, then it'll be true for others, including children. So in my vocation, or I'd say in my life, because my vocation is my life, I want my kids to be happy. Because if they're happy, it's a spillover effect. They will be everything else. So what do we do? So how do we work around it? So in my organization, we work towards this. We've just started working towards this recently, but we're working towards this in all aspects, at all levels, when we're working with teachers, when we're working with children, and when we're working with parents. I've written this as a disclaimer that I am not propagating any religion. I'm not propagating anything, any cult or any, sect or anything. This is nothing to do with religion. It's to do with the way of life. It's to do with my own personal experience and little informal researches which I've done with kids. I don't have any documented evidence and all, but frankly, I don't think I need documented evidence to say that happiness should be our priority. Anyhow, how do we do this? In our teacher training programs, our teachers are encouraged to do meditation. When I say meditation, there are many types of meditation. Just sitting and just being in one place is also meditation. So for us, for our Rocket teachers, we do what is called a twin heart meditation. I don't know, pranic healing is one way of, one path towards, enlightenment, as they call it, or a journey towards going within. And we encourage all our teachers to do a basic pranic healing course where they, get attuned to a way of life like this. Self-appraisals are a must as to how I'm doing, what I'm doing, is something which we encourage a lot. Regular upgrading of skills. Most importantly, we view confidence, self-esteem, and happiness as indicators of well-being. We are not into marks at all, but the point is that if I am sure of these 2-3 things, marks automatically happen. They happen because you feel that you're able to do it. The moment you feel that you're able to climb the mountains, you will be able to climb the mountains. And something which is HQ, I just made this thing up. Happiness quotient for me is much more important than the IQ, which is the intellectual quotient. So for parental involvement, again, look, for parents, I cannot take the onus because they are their own decision makers. What we can do is suggest to them. So to them also, meditation is suggested. We encourage the parents to not be teachers of the kids. You do your job as parents is what we tell them, and we will do the teaching job. Identify the inherent strength of the child, whether it's academic, whether it's non-academic. Everybody is not born to be a professor. Everybody is not born to be academically inclined. There are a lot of kids out there who are non-academically inclined in terms of sports and music and dance and so on and so forth. Whatever it may be, identify that and get the child to follow his or her passion. Celebrate even the smallest of learning, motivating the child. However small the child's jump is, whatever it may be, try to get the child, feel happy for the child, let the child be confident of that. To remember at all times that it is both nature as well as nurture. It is your genetics or where the child is coming from, and it is the environment of the child which is going to make the difference. It's not one and only. And to be the child's biggest advocate. This is for the parent. After all, the child belongs to the parent, and the parent can be the only person who can actually fight the battle if need be. So what do we do in terms, not specifically, children are the biggest goal is my children. I meet with them on a daily basis almost. And what we have developed is called a daily practice. We call it the daily practice. And it is actually, it emphasizes on mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. This is all which has come out of my experience. Like I'm saying, this is how we divide our intervention time with the child. From the mental enhancement point of view, we do activities to enhance the child's cognitive skills or the deficits. It is based on an assessment which identifies the strengths and the weaknesses of the child. It's a neurodevelopmental profile which tells us this is the strength and these are the weaknesses. We don't only work on the weakness, we actually leverage the strength so we can minimize the effects of the weakness. The underpinning is to leverage the strengths while remediating the weaknesses. Idea machine, mental workout for enhancing creativity and innovation. So Idea machine is an idea which we came up, or actually I read about it some time ago, where a child is for 5 minutes, I won't even say 5 minutes, for 3 minutes every day, is encouraged to just think of the impossible. It's like enhancing the creativity of the child. Tomorrow, just to say that, okay, I think tomorrow, someday I will make the car which flies, which is very, very possible now. So just to get that mental work out of the child and to think totally out of the box, we practice that. For physical, we do super brain yoga and brain gym activities. Super brain yoga is again part of the pranic healing activities for children, and it has had it has documented research in terms of enhancing the skills of children with ADHD and dyslexia. And also brain gym is something which is very controversial in the US. However, it is based on movement, and it kinds of talks about developing or enhancing the neural pathways of the left side and the right side of the brain. Plus, in it, the water intake is very, very important. These are some of the newer things which are now, part of special education, and we try to do it as much as possible. Research-based evidence for both these practices in terms of increasing attention to task and engaged time. For emotional, I totally believe in affirmations, and this affirmation which we started to do is called I love myself. Now, I don't know why. I don't have any scientific backing for why I would do this. I actually experienced this myself, that whenever I say I love myself to myself, somewhere in the unconscious there is some connectivity happening, whether my brain with my heart, I don't know. I can't say, I can't give you any support in terms of the scientific aspect. However, the feeling is my experience after doing it for some time. I feel happy. I'm in good space. And we have started doing this for 21 times with all my kids in the morning and in the evening. It takes all of 30 seconds to say it 21 times. Again, why 21 times? Because I believe, and I've experienced and I've read many times over, that continuously, consecutively doing something for 21 times, 21 days, is the basis of forming a habit. And psychotherapy, which is harmonizing and balancing the chakras, chakra and the bioplasmic field, is also something which we believe in. Is the subtle energy bodies, which we have worked with some of our kids, and we do a lot of cleansing for at least 3 or 4 times a week. Nurturing and encouraging children to be happy even at the smallest victories. The whole idea, what you'll see is the happiness quotient, which I'm talking about again and again, and that's what I really believe in. Spiritual is basically involving the parents to keep a cleansed environment. We talk about salt water bowls and balls in the rooms, and salt water baths, incense burning, and lamp burning. So these are the things which we do with our kids when we are working with special needs. And throughout all of them, we also do what is called abdomen breathing, which I feel just kind of connects everything. It's the breathing which we do with kids for, what's it called, pranayam, and it helps brilliantly, okay? So these are the empirical findings which we have found out, that we saw increased self-confidence of the child, increased creativity, increased attention to tasks and engaged time, focus, increased calm, healthier and better sleep pattern with the kids, and most importantly, they were happier with self and with others. So this is what we figured out and we saw for ourselves, and this is the train of thought which we are taking further. Now, what are the points to ponder upon? I mean, what is it? A couple of them. Can contemplative practice be made part of the children's routine? Why only special education? Why not everybody else? Yesterday, my friend, doctor from Harvard, she was saying that, people, in her experiment in the neuroscience, that the people were made to do, indulge in contemplative practices for 8 weeks. And they had positive results after that. And these were adults. I'm saying that why wait for somebody to become 25, 30, 40 years old? Why can't we start at age 3? So if it has shown results then, if we were to think that the kids would be doing this, as a matter of lifestyle from the beginning, can you just imagine what kind of kids we would have? If positives are apparent with children with special needs, then contemplative practice could do wonders with the neurotypical population. So if it can do wonders with children who already started with, let's say baggage, if it can do wonders with them, why can't it do wonders with the normal or the regular population? Can parents also be made more empowered through this? Contemplative practice could be made part of, the parents' repertoire. Can educators be made? Can it become part of the teacher training programs to enhance the learning for everybody? And could a protocol for contemplative practices be evolved for children at different developmental stages? So for a child who's young, and then an adolescent, and then a young adult, and an adult. So can there be protocols developed for something like this, which can be then taken further off and given to the whole society? So these are just basic thoughts which came to me, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Samdra Tachidil Shiva Dang Chapchi, may Tanda Jalagi Poet Zon Jojiva, and a Kalam Mambochi Teba, the Ganganti, Dongamba, the Uniji, Samuna, the type song. Tangazo Gilonji, the Namsindi, Yamachi Kanzati, Kusa, Jangway or Tang, Mother Teresani, may Kukundi Jinita Dajala. 강한 몸보지 지속한다 거나라 강한 매파서 되냐다 매사다 이 말에 강한 뒤 쳇드선이 아니 냥또 냥라체디 강한 뒤서 쳇드선이 동네체디 아니 마데 디제사 니마치 차야게 레와요 지수야 지당 니 저한테 다 공부전쟁이나 가르스거리 지금 매나나매나 같이 오이나 시구나 잡아야면 같이 보고지람 시제 단지 라주사말라 땅아주 가르스거리 메시지하다 토마 메시지 가수나 못도 좀 타마 메시지하던 거 자체 청구하디 담이 자체에 청구하디 가르장 게 지고는 그냥 청구하디 가르가리지 아니 지금 공진하고 넘게 원하지 뒤거때 못전도도 제 나눠서 지수엔 되지나
I'm getting scared.
So as a Buddhist monk, I'm very happy and encouraged to hear about your wonderful job that you are doing with kids. We have like His Holiness and Mother Teresa who have been doing a lot of work for the benefits of others, and I hope that one day what you are doing is not less than what Mother Teresa is doing, and one day hopefully you will become somebody like her. And my question is that at the end of the day in our life, what is the thing that is most important to us, and what is the thing that we don't need in life?
Thank you very much for the Mother Teresa bit. I'm very touched, but I'm nowhere close to being a Mother Teresa. As far as at the end of the day, where we want to be and what do we want, I personally feel that everybody, all of us here, including you and everybody, we all have our own lessons to learn. We are all on our own individualistic journeys. I totally believe in karma. I totally believe in, reincarnations. And I cannot compare my lessons with yours because it's been cumulated, I can only say that awareness of, if I'm in awareness, if I'm in the now, and if I feel that, I'm a better person from what I was, say, yesterday, that's it. I am just on the path. So I don't know. For me, being kind, being compassionate, and being helpful, and being happy and ultimately just being in the now and reveling it is the most important lesson to be learned. That's what I feel.
Teratang Tujiches. Jirda any Mazuki in Chikita, Mizijik Nangola, any Kari chegure khari kechembure khari kechisu khari siadi ane dus ta lathoya yo maris nganzu mi thangma ger thangma ane su manda chadi yores ngayimbi na ane lejumde na da che kewanga chi khelini chins cheza dil zambala ane nganzu thangma ane su chik ta lamga do mas ani manda da ani so kita migi da ko ba manda yodi yores imbina ani nganzu sangma ani so dinde ki ani ger ki manda we ki chewar yumil ma do ba ani ji ga chamning je che da ani mis chik shembeng ki chawa che dinzo ani tumung ki ton ta ke chimbure samgdus